Well, here we are on Pant Marsh, which is a site that we've just taken over to manage as a nature reserve, really, for the next however many years, 25 years or so. It's a fantastic site. It's an original floodplain grassland site, really rare, and floodplain grasslands are rare anyway, but this is a species-rich, unimproved floodplain grassland site. It's got fantastic flora. One of the features of the marsh, Pant Marsh, are these old runnels that run through it, very wet runnels. They may have been part of what was the original river, they may have been part of old drainage systems, but they support these extremely rich swamp communities with things like a loosestrife, and I don't know if that's common loosestrife or tufted loosestrife, I won't lie to you, or yellow loosestrife I mean. It's got meadowsweet in there, it's got a variety of sedges, and it's got some really beautiful things. This is something called marsh sankfoil, but these are genuine floodplain swamp communities, really rich, fantastic habitats for a variety of hoverflies, bees, grass snakes for instance. This is ideal habitat for grass snakes because these sites like this will have frogs in them and things like that, they'll be hunting those. So when you walk across Pant Marsh, have a look out to where you see the wetter stuff for these wonderful swamp fen communities. Well, here we are. So this is another of the really important habitats on Pant Marsh. This actually, what you're seeing here, the purple flower, is Devil's Bit scabious. Devil's Bit scabious is, should be, in my opinion, one of the flowers, the national flower of South Wales, if such a thing can possibly exist. It's a fantastic species. It's something which at this time of year, here we are, early September, on it's so mellow today, it's beginning to rain, on this lovely mellow September day. And you might think that the wildflowers had all had their show this year, but this is when the Devil's Bit scabious comes into its full force. And if you drive around Rhondda Cynon Taf, you'll see fields with haze of purple on them where the Devil's Bit scabious is flowering. It's a fantastic indicator of old grassland. So here we are on Pant Marsh, this old, species-rich hay meadow type grassland, meadow mead type grassland, full of fantastic flowers like the Devil's Bit scabious, black knapweed, bursary trefoil, orchids, species which fundamentally depend on old unimproved soils and long-standing management to maintain them. This is also the sort of habitat that rare insects live in. The marsh fritillary butterfly, which South Wales is of international importance for, lives on this sort of habitat. Later on we'll show you another site whereby we've got what would be called classic roast pasture, which is actually more of a marshy grassland than this, but Devil's Bit scabious is a big component of that as well. But you come here on a summer's day, it's full of buzzings of bees of many different species. It's full of the hover of hoverflies, the chirruping of grasshoppers and crickets, and it's just a fantastic, rich habitat that we're very lucky still to have as something that you can come and look at in many parts of Rhondda Cynon Taf. So this is an orb spider. Again, with the Devil's Bit scabious, they're the sorts of things you see. They come out at this time of year. They make their beautiful orb webs. They hang around, catching the insects that live in these pastures. Recently, there's been work done on orb spiders in Europe, which has actually shown that the density of orb spiders on sites has declined, and that is feared to perhaps be an indication of, again, the crash in insect populations in Europe. So actually, if you go for a walk and you see orb spiders, look at them and be glad they're there, because they're showing you've got a healthy ecosystem, a healthy environment operating still. I'm standing in a wet swamp, my feet are sopping wet at the moment. But part of this is trying to illustrate also that we think of wildflower-rich habitats as habitats that we leave just to become wildflower-rich, but actually we need to manage them, because if we don't manage those habitats, they overgrow and their interest is eventually lost. Now, one of the things we've got here on Pant Marsh is willow scrub. If we didn't manage Pant Marsh for the next few years, it could go almost entirely to willow scrub. That's an interesting habitat, but we lose then a lot of the species underneath because they get crowded out, shaded out. So we want to manage this site. We've also got things like Himalayan Balsam, which is undoubtedly a beautiful looking thing, brought here by Victorian gardeners. Great for bees, but Himalayan Balsam is a highly invasive plant which gets into these habitats and takes them over. And really, you know, if we can't, this site, I remember Pant Marsh maybe 10 years ago hardly had any Himalayan Balsam on it. You walk through it today and there's patches all over and it's closing in. So we need to manage the site to try to reduce some of these invasive plants or stop it turning to woodland, really. And the way in which, really the best way of doing that is on a site like this, which is wet, undulating, is with conservation grazing. It's using things like the right type of calm, friendly cows to do a bit of grazing, to use maybe sometimes ponies to do the grazing. What they do is they get in, they eat the dead grass, they create hoof marks into which seeds can then seed in and then, you know, germinate and re-establish. They'll do things like, if we cut the willows back, they'll come and eat the willow regeneration and keep on top of it. And they absolutely adore Himalayan Balsam. It's like a sweet to them. It's full of sweetie goodness. And they actually preferentially eat it and get rid of it and do a fantastic job. So one of the things that is one of the issues that we want to look at in the near future is trying to see how we can reintroduce conservation grazing onto Pant Marsh in a way which benefits the ecology, reduces these problems of invasion, and works well with the people using the site as well, so people can actually enjoy the animals grazing the site as well as the benefits of what they do. Something that we can all do to help with Himalayan Balsam is to pull it up. The great thing about Himalayan Balsam is it's an annual, comes up every year. It produces vast amounts of seed which throw themselves around, so that's how it proliferates. But fundamentally you can pull it up, roots and all, snap it into a variety of handy snappable pieces and really try and leave it so it's off the ground, because it will re-root given half a chance if it touches the soil. Don't do this when it's just about to pop seeds, because actually by pulling it up you just throw seeds all over the place. The best time to do this is sort of July time, when it's flowering, before it starts throwing seeds around. And if you have any kind of skin allergies, then maybe wear a pair of gloves, because the sap, I think for some people, can be a little bit allergic, if that's the correct word. So there are different ways you can find out you're in some old, ancient meadow. Some of them are by looking for the plants, but another way is actually looking for things like this, an ant's nest. So generally speaking, you know, ant nests are associated with unploughed, long-established grasslands. They can build up their communities, build up the colony. And here's what one of the ant species. I really ought to learn ant species, because they are definitely associated with the old grasslands. But it's something else. If you're going out for a walk and you find a field full of old anthills, even if it's in the middle of winter, then that's a good clue to go back and have a look in the summer, because you very well might find that's a field full of wildflowers and insects. Okay, so this is the Avon Clean. The river, the stream that runs past Pant Marsh, home to otters, home to dippers. Has got some water quality issues. There's a scheme recently, over the recent years, called Clean Up the Clean. It's not quite as clean and healthy as we'd like, but it has got some really important key species, and it shows that if the clean can be cleaned up and some of the water quality issues can be resolved, it'll be a really vibrant and healthy watercourse in the future. It joins the River Ely just down at Pontyclean, and things like, you never know, things like salmon may one day come back up this river. So this is part of Pant Marsh, which has actually had the first kind of community nature reserve action. Back before COVID, a group of people came out, including people from Pencoy College and people from the Wildlife Trust. They did a fantastic day here, removing some of the willow scrub that was taking over this part of Pant Marsh, opening it up, and actually even that, we've seen now the results this summer and spring and summer. This has become more diverse than it was before. And one of the great things about Pant Marsh is that this really is a site that we're hoping to develop community nature conservation action on, get people involved in it, people who may have an interest in different wildlife groups to come here and actually record them. If you want to come out and do some physical work, then it's a great place to come out and do that. And maybe even look at the history of the site and to actually find out more about what this site looked like 200 years ago or 250 years ago. And of course with the backdrop, you may see the backdrop here of Clantriston Old Town, one of the oldest towns in the whole of Glamorgan. It's a really historic landscape. So it's one of the things we're looking to try and develop is actually community-based nature conservation work here at Pant Marsh and some of the other sites we have. So if you'd like to get involved in the community nature conservation work here at other sites, then you can email us at parkscountryside@rctcbc.gov.uk.